Yeah, that's what I had
Yes.
Okay.
How do I connect to the, how can I connect to the Wi-Fi?
Check one.
Test.
Not yet.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We could not hear a
Hello.
thing last meeting. I was wondering if we could get monitors. That's great.
Good evening. Welcome to the West Orange Board of Education meeting on this Flag Day, June 14th. So welcome to our community. Welcome to Dr. Cascone, our board members, and Mrs. Flowers. Would you kindly do roll call for us? Meeting is officially called to order.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Roll call, please. Mrs. Rutter,
Here.
Mrs. Merklinger, Mr. Rothstein,
Here.
Vice President Tunnicliff,
Here.
President Trigg Scales.
Here.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mrs. Flowers. This is a special public board meeting tonight. This is a policy work session. And so if you're just joining us for the first time, this will seem very different from our usual board meetings. We are continuing to work on one of our board goals in an attempt to meet a June deadline of converting our present board policy manual over to Strauss Esme. And at this time, Dr. Cascone, do you have comments?
Thank you, President Trigg Scales, and good evening, members of the board, Ms. Flowers, and to our community. My comments and superintendent's report is really limited to just providing some context for the meeting this evening. We do have a number of policies which are on the docket for second reading and adoption. These are all policies which had been previously reviewed by the board in the first reading. They were then sent back to the administration to go through any additional administrative review. In some cases, that was in personnel. In some cases, that was the business office. I believe last Mr. Rothstein mentioned at the last work session, there were approximately 70 some odd policies that were still in the process of undergoing administrative review. So we're moving forward with a number this evening. It is also worth noting that in your deliverables, there are noted 4 policies in particular, which were organizational chart, policy 1110, employment contract 3124, assignment of additional duties 3134, and employee training 4240, all of which did undergo some minor edits, which have been provided you with some annotations, and then were sent back to Strauss Esme for inclusion in the final copy, the final draft, if you will. Those policies, during the work session portion of the meeting, would be an appropriate time if board members had any questions about those edits, which came from the administration. That would certainly be an appropriate time to ask them in advance of the actual vote and adoption. But beyond that, I have nothing further. We obviously will have a board meeting on Monday, the 21st, with much on that agenda to discuss and on which to present. So with that, I would turn it back over to you, President Trigg-Scales.
Thank you, Dr. Cascone. We're just going to take a quick round through for board reports before we move on to the next session. So Ms. Huerta, anything to report?
No, I have nothing to report. Thank you, President Terry Trigg-Scales.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rothstein.
No, nothing to report. Tonight will be the policy committee meeting. So I think everything I have to say would come out in the course of this discussion.
All right, thank you. And Vice President Tunnicliffe.
Nothing to report tonight. Thank you, President Trigg-Scales.
All right, and at this point, we take questions from the public on agenda items. And Mrs. Flowers, did we have any questions that came in advance of the meeting?
No, President Trigg-Scales, there were no questions through the Google Doc.
All right, thank you. And there are no members of the public at this point in time. So, Mr. Rothstein, we're going to move right into our roll up your sleeves policy work.
Great, thank you so much. Excuse me. I was thinking maybe the best way to go about this, I went through and identified of the items that are on the list tonight for review, there's only a handful that had changes to them or for which I think there's some additional discussion worth having. So if it's okay with you, President Trigg-Scales, I'll move in the order first of the ones that require some additional discussion. And then the remaining items are all to be adopted as is. Okay, and then just so that everybody can keep pace here, if you have your list of policies that we're discussing tonight, the ones that either have had changes made to them or that I think require a little bit of additional discussion are the first one, number 1110, organizational chart. In the 3000 series, number 3124. I kind of feel like I'm calling bingo here. Number 3130. Number 3134. Down to the 4000 series, number 4214. And number 4240. Those six are the ones that I think we need to discuss. The rest of them, certainly anyone can discuss if they'd like, but there were no changes to the policies as drafted. So I think let's begin with 1110, the organizational chart. And Dr. Cascone, is it correct that you and Dr. Vespignani put this together?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rothstein. So the organizational chart that you see embedded within the policy template is the most recent update to that, which is inclusive of the job title change for the Director of Special Services, converting that to the Executive Director of Special Services, and then sliding the District Director of Student Counseling Services under that position. So it's reflective of the most recent change. I'm comfortable moving it forward to the board for approval at this time with the understanding that this may be one that'll be back on the docket for review fairly quickly. And also to perhaps include some additional feedback which came from the board relative to the inclusion of teachers on the organizational chart. Many district organizational charts, ironically and somewhat paradoxically, don't include teachers. And so Dr. Vespignani and I are trying to understand the best way to kind of work them into the flow chart, understanding that there are a variety of different locus of control and oversight parties for that. So accomplishing that in the flow chart without making it too cluttered or, kind of difficult to discern.
Dr. Cascone, I might have a suggestion. I'll talk to you at another time.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a flow chart junkie, so.
It's funny, we were actually looking for a flow chart expert, so you're hired.
Okay.
Voluntary though, of course.
So I did not have any questions or recommendations for any changes to the organizational chart. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to bring up, or can we move on to the next policy?
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Because on the original policy adoption status summary that we've been working from, it lists identification. And were there any other things that should be included that, or is this the org chart is the primary document under there? I didn't know if there were supplementary materials.
Yeah, this policy actually, as it came to us, just has the title and it's an otherwise blank
Oh, okay.
page. Yeah, so it's for the district to complete the organizational chart as we see fit.
Great, thank you.
All right. I'm going to move on to the next one then, which is number 3124. And in 3124, there were 2 lines that were removed from the second paragraph. Otherwise, this remains as drafted by Strauss Esme. I'm just looking for the lines that were removed. I'm sorry, 1 second.
The items that were removed, Mr. Rothstein, is that what you were, right? It was.
Oh yeah, I just found it.
You got it. Okay.
Oh yeah, so this is in the second paragraph, there were lines removed. One of them requiring that as a part of the employment contract, a full description of the certification held by the teaching staff members should be included and dated, and the date on which the certification expires. So that's been removed. And also a line in that same paragraph requiring the intervals of salary payment to be included in the contract. And so I'm making an assumption about the removal of those lines, that it's because it's possible that there could be some flexibility in that. And so we don't want to lock that into the contract. But I don't know, Dr. Cascone, if you can clarify that.
Sure. As far as the certification description, prior to a staff member being forwarded to the board for approval for employment, they're possessing the necessary credentials is a part of that review process. One could argue that in previous days prior to the for lack of a better word, tracking of all staff members through a staff identification number to ensure that the course to which they're aligned and they teach, they are appropriately certificated. The state audits that through that system. And so it's really superfluous and unnecessary to add that information to the employment contract. Relative to the intervals, this is really appropriate in a district where 10 versus 12-month payment options are afforded. And correct me if I'm wrong, 10-month employees are only paid on a 10-month. They do not have a 12-month option.
They do have
They-
12 or 12 option.
They
Some
do.
paid option. But that's something we opt in.
That's interesting. Because Dr. Vespignani recommended removal of the intervals. I guess that's just, is that typically something that would appear in an employment contract?
No, not an employment contract.
Okay.
It's not necessary to be included in the employment contract because it's strictly optional.
Okay.
And I would imagine also with regards to the certification that can change over time. And then a new contract would need to be drawn up to reflect that as well. So yeah, it makes sense to me that if it's not required for the contract, then it would be simpler to just leave it out.
Yeah, what appears on the contract is the job title as aligned with the district job description. So they'd be teacher, school principal, assistant principal, what have you, school nurse, and so it's almost kind of it's implied, if you will, that if the person's being offered a contract, that the Human Resources Department has vetted their application, their credentials, and they possess the necessary certificate to serve in that position.
Great. All right, well, I know I don't have any further questions about this policy and the changes. I'd ask other members of the board, if you do, to please make them known.
I have a comment. So this is under the column that says most wording cannot change, adopt as is. But in the notations, I guess we had reviewed this policy before, and it looked like we wanted to keep the West Orange policy versus the Strauss Esme policy
Huh, I did not see that notation on this one.
for 3124.
Yeah.
The West Orange policy is 4111. The West Orange policy goes much more in depth about employment, and it's a bit different. And I think that my question had more to do with, it did not necessarily have to do with employment contract, but employment and hiring practices.
Could this be a case where it's part of another?
That's
Um,
possible. I don't have
Strauss Esme.
I don't have my connection to the internet, and so I'm not seeing what you're seeing.
Okay.
I'm going to try again to get connected here.
Right, I'm not able to connect.
Yeah, I think that, Mr. Rothstein, if I might,
Yes, please.
right, so I think that, West Orange Board of Education Policy 4111, entitled Recruitment, Selection, and Hiring, encompasses, multiple aspects of the hiring process. And I think, we've kind of observed this a number of the times over the course of this process. And I don't know if it was it's sort of an approach difference between the New Jersey School Board's policies and Strauss Esme. Strauss Esme really teases out, which might explain why there are so many more Strauss Esme policies, because if you look at the New Jersey School Boards, there really aren't that many policies because they bundle a lot of them together. And I think this is just really specifically about employment contract, whereas recruitment is really a thing of a different nature. I think that might explain it to some extent.
So does Strauss Esme have any policies that are similar to the West Orange 4111 policy?
Well, I think when it comes to recruitment, part of recruitment would fall under the auspices of affirmative action, right? And ensuring, of which there are policies for Strauss Esme, ensuring that the district's recruitment and hiring practices are in alignment with federal affirmative action legislation and obviously policy. I think when it comes to selection, to me, we're talking about a board policy. I mean, selection, I would think, speaks really more to regulations, because it would speak to, the hiring processes, which are really at the discretion of the Department of HR. And from my experience, don't typically fall into policy under the auspices of policy. Policy ensures that the practices are equitable, and then it's really in the hands of the administration to create practices and procedures that ensure that they are equitable. And so, when you look at some of the things that Dr. Vespignani spoke to in previous meetings about the ways in which hiring processes are being and recruitment practices are being kind of reformed and changed. But all those things would really fall under the auspices of administrative practice and procedures rather than policy.
Okay, just because this was a fairly recent adoption of a policy, well, from the date that's stated on the website, it's December 17th of 2018. And so I don't know if that makes a difference, but they felt, or this previous board felt the need to adopt the policy or to have this policy here.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'll give that a try.
Well, certainly if, if it were the will of the board to table the policy until such time that the crosswalk policy for the Strauss estimate could be identified, that's certainly an option.
Wouldn't we have done that already?
Oh, well, I'll let Gary pull up the policies.
I mean, I
Keep
know
your
we would
fingers
have done
crossed.
it. We've
Yeah.
been through all of them.
Yes, I mean, that's why I stated in my notation that it looked like we had agreed, or like I said, it just said, my notations to keep the West Orange policy, so I wasn't sure if there was further discussion.
Okay, so
Let's see what Mr. Rothstein, our policy guru, has.
okay, yes. I see that, and I think that this is one that I checked, and there was no difference between the two. Let me double check. This was employment contract. Did you say, though, that it's a
So
lot more? What's the West Orange policy number?
4111. It's very different from the Strauss estimate policy, as
Got
Dr.
it.
Keskel noted. So I'm not sure if we will check if there was a policy similar to that of the West Orange one for Strauss, with Strauss estimate.
I'm sorry? For, I'm okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I do see, and I did miss this one, so thank you for bringing that up. This looks to me, so 4111 looks to me like it's a different, it deals with a different topic, and I'm going to search Strauss estimate right now for recruitment. So give me one moment. Yeah, I'm not sure if we have anything equivalent to West Orange 4111. So it does raise an interesting question. I'm just trying hiring as well to see if that offers a Strauss estimate policy that's more in alignment with 4111.
What's the title of that one, Ms. Huerta, 4114?
The title, 1 second.
It's recruitment, selection, and hiring. Okay, so possibly Strauss estimate policy 1613. And I'm going to check the status of that one in terms of our adoption.
Could you repeat that?
1613.
One 6113 is disclosure and review of applicants' employment history is what's coming up for me. I don't
That's
know.
what I'm looking at, yeah.
Okay, because that's a mandated one for Strauss estimate.
And not yet adopted. Right.
Well, and there's also an employment contract under support staff members, which is 4124. So they break it out more granularly by function. it looks like in the Strauss Esme stuff.
I'm sorry, Jen, could you repeat that?
No, I was just saying there's also an employment contract under support staff members, which is in the 4,000 series. So it's 4124. And I think, what we found is that these are sometimes in multiple places because of, they break it out by function rather than just bucket it into all one.
One is
Policy.
certificated and one is
Yeah.
not non-certificated.
Right, and I think that's what we discussed last time, that we were going to double reference it between the policies that already are adopted or the ones that Strauss Esme has that are left to be adopted. So I wasn't sure if anything came back from that.
Yeah, excuse me, what I'm seeing in West Orange policy 4111 is a number of areas covered that don't seem to be covered in the same way in the Strauss Esme policies.
Mr. Ross, do you mind just add something there?
Yeah, please.
I think, and I think that maybe because the West Orange policy 4111 is arguably not even about an employment contract. It's about a number of different antecedents to the actual offering of the contract, including the recruitment, the selection, and the hiring. Strauss Esme policy employment contract is very specifically focused on when we look at a contract that is going to be written and provide to the staff member what that contract will contain. It's very narrowly focused on the parameters and the language that are in components that are included within that employment contract. The West Orange policy ranges well beyond that into a number of areas that actually have very little to do with the employment contract document itself.
Yeah, agreed.
Right.
I think the question then would be not whether 3124 needs to match West Orange 4111, but rather what we want to do with West Orange 4111, whether that language needs to find a home somewhere in our policies.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a good call. Mrs. Schwartz, thank you for catching that. Here's what my recommendation would be. I would still recommend moving forward with 3124, which is narrowly focused on the contract, and to add a note on our tracking document to revisit 4111 and find either where the language in that policy is covered in other policies in Strauss Esme, and or find if there's some language that we want to keep and where that belongs.
I agree.
Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let me just make that quick note, and then I think we can move on. Okay, great. I've highlighted that, so I'll follow up on that policy. All right, great. Any other discussion on 3124?
No.
All right. So next I'd like to look at 3130, assignment and transfers.
3130. Where is that?
Oh, so that wasn't provided in,
3134.
yeah, 3134 wasn't a part of our packet, but it's on for a second reading and there were no changes. So what I can do is I can describe what the addition would be if we chose to make it. Give me one moment here.
3130.
Correct, 3130. Yeah, I don't think that it's in here. It just appears
No.
on our list. Yes. Okay, so 3130 is assignment and transfer. It's a very brief policy providing some governance over the assignment and transfer of employees. There's one sentence that appears in the West Orange policy that does not appear in Strauss Esme 3130. Otherwise, they're identical. So that policy or that line that's missing, would you like me to read the Strauss Esme policy? It's brief.
Would you think?
Okay, so it reads currently, the superintendent shall make support and certified staff assignments and transfers in the manner best calculated in his or her judgment to enhance the educational program. Teaching, supervisory, administrative, and support personnel are subject to assignment and transfer after recommendation of the superintendent and approval by the Board of Education. Procedures for such transfers shall comply with provisions of current negotiated agreements and state and federal law. Disciplinary transfers are prohibited. Discrimination in assignment, transfer, and promotion shall not be tolerated. The only line that's a discrepancy between Strauss Esme and West Orange is the West Orange policy has a second to last line. So just before discrimination and assignment, transfer, and promotion shall not be tolerated. And that line reads, particular attention shall be paid to ensuring to the extent possible that there shall be equivalence of staff among the schools.
Can you read there that there will be?
Sure. Particular attention shall be paid to ensuring to the extent possible that there shall be equivalence of staff among the schools.
What does that mean?
I was hoping you would know.
I don't know.
Does that mean they,
Number of related arts teachers. That's the way I would interpret that. is that-
I interpreted the same as you,
Yeah.
Mrs. President.
So one school wouldn't be disproportionately staffed over others.
I think that I would be hesitant to include, I understand where it's going, but I think it can be problematic because the number of staff that are deployed to buildings, particularly when you think about related arts teachers, are not always equal by virtue of, quirks of the schedule, the number of students, right? So I would think that there would need to be some kind of massaging of that language to add that qualification. It's really more that, right?
yeah.
Um,
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Did it say whenever possible or
Yeah.
something to that?
I'll read it again. Particular attention shall be paid to ensuring to the extent possible
effect?
that there shall be equivalence of staff among schools.
Right, like we have, we might have different, we have different numbers of sections of now, I think where the equalizer, kind of the balance comes is when we have a consistent approach to class size. And then, so we can ensure that, there aren't classes in one school versus another. I'm talking primarily of regular classrooms. That we maintain the same maximums of class size, and then, the number of staff that's necessary in each school to ensure that's the case is maybe different from school to school, depending upon the number of students. But I would be concerned about including that language without some additional qualification to that line. Because I understand what it's saying, but for a policy, it's not clear. Because it's not going to be equal necessarily. It's going to be what that school needs in order to maintain certain standards.
So we're talking about equity more than equal.
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
That's right. So, if the board felt that, the spirit of that line is something you'd like to see included in the policy, we could do one of two things. We could either approve the Strauss Esme policy the way it is and flag that as a policy we want to take a closer look at subsequently, or we can table it, revise the language and move it forward for a second adoption at a later date.
I like the first option, that we move it forward, flag it, and look at it at a later date. As time is of the essence and we're getting close to our deadline.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a curious omission in the sense that I wondered whether West Orange added that line, and if so, why wasn't there more clarity around exactly what that meant and what situation that was addressing? Or whether Strauss Esme might have had it and removed it because it's so murky. It's unclear exactly what that statement is intended to ensure. So I'm totally in support of approving this and flagging it and, having that conversation afterward. Disagreed? Agreed?
I'm a bit hesitant to push it forward. Just because, when is our next policy workshop?
This is it.
This is our last one for this.
This is our last scheduled policy workshop.
Okay.
It's one sentence.
Right.
That can be added at a later time, if the board agrees. But if we table it, then it's going to push it off even further and we have to get back to it.
So how many policies do we still need to push forward
Well, we're going to get to that in a little
at
bit.
the end? Okay,
There are more that will need to be addressed
right,
later.
exactly. Okay. I agreed. If we can notate it and come back to it, definitely.
Yeah, the policy committee's work is never done. It's never, ever done, right? Mr. Austin?
That is very true. Okay, I'm just going to make a notation here in the tracker.
So that's 3130.
What is the corresponding West Orange policies? Are the policies, the old policies, once these new policies are adopted, where are we going to be able to see the old West Orange policies? Once we switch over, it's going to be gone, right?
Well, the old West Orange policies, I imagine they'll be archived. I don't know. They could be archived somewhere, I would think, but they should not be available on the website after we've adopted the new policies and Elon Online is put into place. We don't want to create any confusion about what our policies are.
Right. So where would they be archived? So that we can go back and review it and compare it to the new one?
Yeah.
We do have, first I would say that these links, though will be deactivated, are still there on the back end, if you will. And secondly, we do have hard copy manuals for all those policies. So if we wanted to, for a subsequent policy meeting, kind of pull an archive West Orange policy for review, we could certainly do that. In other words, once we take them off the website, they will still exist in some form, whether it be digital or hard copy for us to pull from.
We could create a Google Drive for them so that the board can access them, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah, what I probably have Mr. Santiago do is basically create like an archive where those links live that you could go to. They wouldn't be public facing, but you could see them.
But at least we'd be able to see it to reference, to go back to anything we had flagged.
Exactly.
Right. I think that would be good. Thank you.
Okay, great. So what I'm hearing is that we have agreement to move on from 3130.
Yes.
All right. 3134 was included in your packet. And there was one line removed from the second paragraph, and I'll read that. So in the previous version, there was a line that stated, this was at the end of the second paragraph after candidates for the position, that read, wherever possible, the board will fill athletic coaching positions with physical education teachers. So the omission of that being that, I guess, special consideration would not necessarily be given to physical education teachers for coaching positions.
Correct. And obviously we want to hire the best candidates regardless of, what their certification area may be. And there are there is certain code which also governs hiring as it relates to extracurricular positions. That ensures, for example, that internal candidates have right of first refusal and things of that nature. So. But I thought this was an astute pickup by Dr. Vespagnani and appropriate edit.
I agree. I'm just worried that if we adopt it, somebody's going to make me run laps.
I can't prevent them. Mr. Austin, so you better get prepared.
All right. Well, I'm okay with that change. Any discussion? All right. Next item then is 4214. Oh, and I'm sorry, this one is not in your packet. So let me describe that one.
Can you repeat that number, Mr. Austin?
Yes, it's 4214. The policy is called conflict of interest. And in this case, there was a notation about, this one also is very, very similar to the West Orange policy. The one difference is that the West Orange policy has a paragraph about bribery that states bribery and corrupt practices by employees as described in the Criminal Justice Code are forbidden and shall be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Mr. Rothstein, correct me if I'm wrong. Did Strauss Esme have a policy specifically entitled bribery?
I'm going to search that right now.
I seem to recall this conversation coming up the first time we read it, and I think we ascertained that was the case, but I could be wrong.
I don't see. Just checking my spelling here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything come up in Strauss Esme with the word bribery.
But I'm not sure it belongs in a conflict of interest policy either.
The West Orange policy is 4119.21/421921, and it's titled Employee Conflict of Interest.
Hmm.
And as mentioned, it's very similar to the Strauss Esme one. Now, again, that doesn't mean that the West Orange one is necessarily the better written of the two. I'm just calling out the discrepancy.
Mhm.
Right, and then 4215 is Code of Ethics. So like the bribery or something.
Of Strauss Esme.
Yeah. Mhm.
Could you repeat the second West Orange policy? I have 4119.21.
Correct. It's actually one policy, but it's got two numbers. I'm not sure why they do it that way. 4119.21/4219.21. I think that may be because it combines policies that deal with certificated and non-certificated staff, but I'm not completely sure that's right.
One notation I have here in my notes, it says also West Orange policies says an employee, school official, and defines school official. That's just what I have in my notes. So
Say that again, Ms. Puerta.
West Orange policy says an employee or school official, and then goes on to define school official.
Yeah, so that's school official, I would imagine that in the Strauss Esme policy, it probably cites code next to school official, because it's defined under New Jersey Administrative Code 6A, the definition of the school official. So, you see that oftentimes. The difference is in the West Orange policies, it provides the definition and the language from the code itself, whereas the Strauss Esme policy just references the code. just for clarification. So, I mean, if the board felt it were, and this is a point, admittedly, that the point of discussion we've had is that, if these policies are meant, right, and assume they are, to be understandable to a member of the community that's reading the policy, it's helpful for them to understand what the definition of school official. Are they going to go to NJ Administrative Code 6A and look up the definition of school official? Probably not. So.
Are they
Well, as-
hyperlinked? Sorry.
No,
they're
sorry.
not
Oh, they're not.
No.
we went through this
No.
before.
Sorry, what was the question?
No, I was asking if the Strauss Esme policies were hyperlinked to the
Right, they're not.
code and,
And I think that we would have liked to see that because that was a question and a discussion that
Mhm.
we've had
Yeah.
previously that would be helpful.
yeah, that
So-
makes it a lot easier for people to reference it and know.
But they're not presently.
So my recollection on this particular policy is, so this was reviewed at the March 25th meeting. And I think what we found is many of the discrepancies between the two were covered in other Strauss Esme policies. The one that was carried over in our notes here was literally just that one mention of bribery.
Yes, I see that note as well.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it was all of the other differences we found elsewhere.
Okay.
So, again, this is one of those where I'm not really sure that the Strauss Esme policy would be enhanced by adding that line back in about bribery.
And I'm not sure it belongs in code of ethic or under conflict of interest either. I think it would more so belong in code of ethics, like under the administrator's code of ethics, which is 1540 in Strauss Esme, rather than in this particular one.
Or 4215.
Or as, President Scale
Under
says,
teaching staff.
4125.
Yeah.
So maybe this is one that we address the same way we've addressed a couple of others this evening, that we move forward with conflict of interest as written, as drafted,
Mhm.
and then make a notation to look for whether there's a policy elsewhere that would benefit from a mention of bribery.
Sounds good.
Okay, let me make that
For
note.
some reason, I have in my notations a bylaw 9270. So I'm trying to look up if that's on the West Orange bylaw, or I don't see anything in the Strauss Esme bylaw. So I'm just going to.
They're in
assume-
the beginning.
I mean, I don't see 9270 in the bylaws for Strauss Esme, or unless I'm not being able to pull it up, so. I
Do you
just
see
haven't-
anything under teaching staff? 400s or 4,000s?
Oh, that says bylaw conflict of interest on the West Orange policy, West Orange bylaws. Conflict of interest.
Is that for board members or teaching staff?
Yeah, I would think if it's a bylaw, it probably applies to us.
Bylaw is for us. Yeah.
Okay,
So it might be in the 4,000s.
I don't have a notation. for it.
What's in the code of ethics? I'm curious. I'm 4215.
And there's a code of ethics 3211 for the teaching staff. And there's probably also one for the support staff would be my guess.
Yeah.
Yes. 4215.
Would you like me to read 4215?
Yeah, that's support staff. What's the corresponding one for the teaching staff? Code of ethics. 3211. Let's see what's in there. 3211. If there's any bribery in there.
Well, I had searched Strauss Esme for bribery and it didn't come up.
What was that
Right.
number, Miss?
3211.
11.
So this is a longer policy. I'm just skimming it for relevance.
3211 is the West Orange or the Strauss Esme? I'm sorry.
Strauss Esme. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that deals specifically with that concept of bribery.
Okay.
Oh, actually, hold on. Shall not accept any gratuity, gift, or favor that might impair or appear to influence professional decisions or
Oh,
actions.
well, that's close.
That's the language in the Strauss Esme policy.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's in the Code of Ethics for teaching staff members,
3211.
3211.
And I think the distinction, if I may,
Yeah,
is that,
right.
that accepting a gift is not illegal per se, right? It's
In
whereas,
exchange.
bribery is, if it's in the penal code,
Mhm.
it's, it's implied, assumed that as employees, you're not going to break laws, right? But accepting a gift is more of an ethics violation more than it is actually something that's legal. per se.
Right, but if it's accepting a gift in exchange
For,
for
right,
something, then that sort of
quid
becomes
pro quo.
very close to bribery. Yes.
Yeah, the wording here is that it would not, that might impair or appear to influence professional
Yeah, that's-
decisions or actions.
Yeah, I think that kind of touches on bribery.
Yep.
I would agree.
Is that one for adoption now, or have we adopted that one already?
Give me one moment and I will let you know. 3211.
We adopted that in February.
That's funny. Your list says February.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. You're looking at
September.
3211.3. Yeah, September 21st
Yeah,
of 2020.
I was looking at the other one.
That was adopted.
So that cleans that up, right?
Okay, yeah. So I think what I'm hearing then, and I would agree with this, a level of comfort with moving forward with conflict of interest without adding the
Yes.
paragraph about
Yes.
bribery.
Yes.
Correct, yes.
Yes.
Okay, let me update my note and then we can move on to the last one for discussion. All right then. And the last one was included in our packet, 4240.
Mhm.
And in this, the previous version of the Strauss Esme policy did not include the third paragraph. So the third paragraph that you're seeing is brand new. And this is with regards to reimbursing employees for attendance at training programs.
So what's different here is approval, advanced approval by the school business administrator. That's what's new.
That we will
No, the whole
reimburse and
thing.
approve.
That whole,
Yeah, the entire third paragraph. Yeah.
Mhm. But I mean, what's significantly different, correct, Dr. Cascone? Is
Yeah,
that-
the addition of that paragraph just memorializes the final step of the process, which is actually audited or controlled, if you will, through the business office, which is basically the review of it's a submission of a, completion of training form. And that actually goes through the business office.
Right, but I thought what was significant here was in advance. Right?
The way I'm reading the paragraph is,
So
I'm sorry.
you don't take the course and then request reimbursement. The course would have been,
Right, well, I think what this paragraph is saying is that the reimbursement, the actual disbursement of the funds
Mhm.
doesn't happen until the business administrator reviews this form. The approval, let's call it a tuition reimbursement request, actually runs through the personnel office. And the personnel office audits it to ensure that it's properly aligned with the language of the CBA and that it would be reimbursable should the person actually complete the course. In the case of a PD, Ms. Flowers, in this particular case, would review it after all was said and done to clear it for actual reimbursement.
Okay.
Yeah, but yes, you're absolutely right. It's a check and balance to make sure that all necessary steps have been taken prior to the district dispersing the reimbursement.
Right, thank you.
That was absent from the stress estimate policy.
Right.
Looks good to me.
Okay. I'm fine with it.
Okay, so those were the those were the only policies that I made notes of that had reasons to discuss. The rest of the policies on our list for second reading and adoption are appearing tonight as they appeared to us at previous meetings unchanged. And so I believe that none of us expressed a concern about them in the past. I think they could be moved forward.
All right, so we are ready for no further discussion. We're ready for a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? There being none, Mrs. Flowers, would you do the honors, please?
Okay. Mrs. Huerta,
Yes.
Mrs. Merklinger is absent. Mr. Rothstein,
Yes.
thank you. Vice President Tunnicliff,
Yes.
President Trick Scales.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Before we move on, since this is our last scheduled policy meeting this school year, I'd like to just get some feeling from the board how we can proceed moving forward. You know that our goal, we extended the goal through June 2021 and wanted to check with Mr. Rothstein to see exactly where we are at this point in time with remaining policies.
So in terms of the exact number, I would need a few minutes to rearrange this and count those up. But since I know we were at roughly, I think about 140 before, and we've moved forward. Let's see, at our last meeting, I believe that at this point, just ballparking it, we're probably in the neighborhood of about 80 more policies that require approval. Does that sound about right, or?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm going with a gut ballpark here because it'll take a minute to reorganize and count in the spreadsheet here. The ones that require, there are some that are still out for administrative review. And so we'll await that feedback. And then there are some that just required Mrs. Merklinger and myself to go through and insert any language that had been discussed at a previous previous meeting and put that back in front of the board.
Do you have any idea how many are still under review, Dr. Cascone?
Under administrative review?
Yeah.
I believe we're in the neighborhood of about just under 50. But those, the tough thing is that we're to the 21st. I mean, I'm envisioning that we'll probably have about half that.
Oh, really?
That'll be ready to move forward next week.
Okay.
And the other half really are, some of those are just simply a matter of filling in blanks. Quick question for Ms. Flowers. Ms. Flowers, we had discussed the possibility of adding another late June meeting for the purpose of approving the HVAC vendor.
Correct.
Is that still being considered?
Yes, that's still up for discussion.
So just to and just follow me here as I kind of take this circuitous route. So right now, the buildings and grounds and business department are in the process. Have those bids opened yet?
Not yet. We're still waiting to get the approval from board council before we
Okay,
advertise.
right. So the idea is, and Ms. Flowers, do you have an estimate as to when we'll be ready to open?
Hopefully by Wednesday or Thursday of this week
Wednesday or Thursday this week
to submit the advertisement. Sure.
for the advertisement, and then how many days have to pass?
10 days after the advertisement in the paper. So we're looking at the last week in June for bid opening,
So potentially like Monday, the 28th?
potentially bid would have to be open, can't be open on a Monday, so it would have to be a Tuesday, the 29th, or
Tuesday,
Wednesday, the
29th,
30th.
which means we'd have to, and there is the possibility that we could walk away on the 29th with an affirmative identification of the vendor.
Correct.
That being said, we would have to schedule a meeting for the 30th in advance, understanding that we'd be scheduling it largely for the purpose of approving the vendor, and with the slight possibility that we might not walk away from the bid hearing on the 29th with a potential vendor, yet the meeting would still be on the calendar. Now, follow me just a bit longer. If that happened, where the vendor was not identified for approval, we would still have a meeting on the 30th to another bite at the apple for our policies. So, and on the strict scales, I understand, I had shared that previously, and the board availability may not necessarily be across the board for the 30th, but that, I like just from the superintendent's perspective, I like the idea of that meeting on the 30th, because it not only gives us an opportunity to potentially approve this HVAC vendor and get them moving on the work, but it also represents another opportunity to move policies forward. And I feel pretty confidently, President Triggscales, that if I had one more meeting at the end of June, I could have all the administrative review policies done. Thank you for entertaining that tangent.
That was a very good tangent.
I would say, I think it's also possible that a number of the policies that are sitting with the policy committee, just looking through the notes again right now, I think it's an achievable goal
Really?
to, yeah.
Wow. That's fabulous.
It's a decent amount of work still, but I think it's definitely
Yes.
achievable.
Burning the midnight oil. It will take some
Always.
time. Right. All right, well, that's very encouraging. I wasn't expecting to hear that, so that's wonderful. Any discussion about Ms. Werter? Are you feeling anything about June 30th? Are you thinking about June 30th in any special way?
Well, I guess now I'm thinking about it in a special way. I mean, I'm available. I can make myself available for the 30th, and I guess as long as we have time to review the policies, I think that's what's going to make the difference of, being
Right.
able to go through with them.
If we know what we're looking at in advance, then when we come into the meeting, we can
Right.
get right through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So these would be policies that we're going to first reading for the 30th, or are these policies that are going for second reading?
Well, so everything has had a first reading.
Okay.
So what this would be is modification based on the feedback that was given at the first reading. And I'm not sure what that technically makes the representation. Is it a new first reading because of the modification? Or is it a second reading because now we're looking at the changes, having seen
I
them already?
believe with the modifications, it's the second, because that's what you would be voting on.
So I think what we would do is we would present what the changes were, have discussion, and if we were okay with those changes, they could be adopted. If we weren't okay with those changes, correct me if I'm wrong, we would just table those and make further changes and bring them back again for another second reading.
All right, so looks like we have a plan. Vice President Tunnicliff, anything you want to add about
I think that
our
sounds like a good
policy
plan.
plans for completion?
So one more
Right.
question. I know, Mr. Rothstein, you said that we had a different column for policies that we wanted to readdress, basically. So for example, like the 411 that we discussed today, do we have those policies set aside that we know we want to go back and look into further, even after adoption?
Yeah, so those,
I mean, since I've been on, I don't think it's many, but
yeah, we set up the column for that, which is column L in the tracker. There's nothing currently identified that way, but that would just be a matter of continuing to do the work of going through the notes in column K, and anything that has been, well, for example, tonight, the ones that we said we would follow up on, I highlighted in yellow. Those really belong in column L under follow up at a later date.
okay.
So what we're doing really, it's really both. We're adopting those policies and we're going to continue to follow up because, as our president said, this work is never done.
Right.
Okay. Wonderful. All right, so we are now up to petitions and hearings of citizens, and we had one. But I think he's no longer here.
After this riveting conversation, I can't
Yeah,
believe that.
Stimulating policy. So I guess we have reached the end of our agenda for this evening. That seems so early. I'm hesitant, but I think we're really at the end. And so just would like to remind everyone that our town hall is taking place this Wednesday, June 16th. And we do hope that everyone will join us. This is going to be a virtual town hall where the board will get to share the results of the survey that so many of you participated in. And then we will move further as we explain how we are going to come up with the district goals and subsequently the board goals as well. So we hope that everyone is able to join us, and that's at 7 p.m. on June 16th, and that's a Wednesday. In fact, that's day after tomorrow. And so let's see, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Rothstein. Is there agreement? A
Yes,
second? A second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is officially adjourned. Good evening.